we've talked a lot about Missio Dei. We talked a lot about this idea of Missio Dei, and I think just to sort of make a point initially, it's just a tool for us. It's just a way of helping us grasp some ideas, ideas about Scripture, ideas about how we exist as church, ideas about how we do mission. There's nothing marvellously revelatory about, just because it's Latin, and it's very easy to think that because it's Latin, there's some profound and new truth in there. There isn't particularly. It can be translated into English, and probably should be, and that would take away some of the mystique of the whole thing. But it's just a tool to help us understand. There's a reason why we want to use this tool at this moment, and we will come on to that a little bit as we go along. But it is just a tool, so let's sort of just demystify it a little bit if that's necessary. Well, just to bring us up to, remind us where we've got to so far, I want to summarise in 4 dynamics plus one extra one, that is what we're going to be getting on to. Okay, the first one, the sending of God. Now that's obviously built into the Missio. That's what Missio Dei is about, and that's what Christine talked about in the first session. That in some sense we think of God as a God who sends, as a God who goes, as a God who sort of creates this movement out into the world. And a big part of what was significant in that thought was, if you remember, that Christine took the knitting and put herself in the midst of things, and then invited Bethany, wasn't it? But it would apply to all of us. Invited Bethany to join us. So the first dynamic there is this sending dynamic of a God who goes, and in some sense, brings us into that movement. And that's the second thought, this invitation of humanity to participate in what God's doing. In a way, we're thinking of God ahead of us here. This is not God behind us pushing us out to do what we've been instructed to do. The way we're thinking and the ideas that are coming with this Missio Dei concept, that in some sense it's important to see God ahead of us. And that we have been invited to join in Him in what He's doing. One of the thoughts, I'm not sure this has been brought out quite so much, at least not explicitly. One of the things that we're doing through this Missio Dei concept, and through, for example, this whole notion of a sort of an incarnational, missional approach to church planting and so on, is expanding the redemptive reach of the church, so that we're not simply thinking in terms of soul winning in the classical sense, but we understand redemption to be a very broad, a very embracing concept, that it impacts life right across the spectrum of human existence. And although we may not want to use the term New World Order that Roger came up with in the first session, because it has certain political overtones, they seem to have faded somewhat, it is something like that. It's being a community that somehow embodies in itself, somehow communicates through its life, God's new world order. That is the whole experience of being created in relationship with the Creator who dwells in our midst, in relationship with one another, and in a rather tense and difficult relationship with the world around us. So that's a third point. A fourth point, this is what Wes was talking about yesterday, the eschatological pull of God's future. If you tell that big story, the meta-narrative of the renewal of creation, where it lands, as Wes made very clear, is not heaven. It's the renewal of all things, a new heaven and a new earth, and the place of God's dwelling, the holy city, the new Jerusalem, descends to be part of this new created order. Now, how that relates to where we are now, and there's also sort of theological questions, that one could explore around that. We're not going to. Wes's point was very simple, that as a community of new creation, we are a sign of that final eschatological renewal. And part of our task, And part of what has been given to us, just to make it clear, this is not something that's in our own strength, what has been given to us through the Spirit, through the redemption that we have in the one who was raised from the dead, as Wes said, an ontological novelty, if that actually meant anything to anybody. Basically, the point was, ontology is that sort of the thing of existence. It's all about being. It's about existence. And this new thing is utterly new that God is doing. Anyway, we somehow embody that in ourselves as first fruits, as God's new creation now. To some extent, we make it real through transformation of people's lives. Through healing, through miracles, through an experience of the supernatural Spirit of God. But in many ways, it is a prophetic existence that we have. We don't achieve everything. We remain stuck in our sinfulness. But we point ahead by the grace of God. We are assigned to the world of of God's future. We live in that sort of tractor beam of God's future. And it's part of a story that begins with Abraham, who was called by God and told that he would be blessed, that God would make him fruitful, and he would be multiply him, and he would fill the land. It's new creation right from the start. It runs right through the story, and it ends up in this extraordinary vision at the end of Revelation of all things made new. What I'm going to try and add to this, and as I say, there's a good chance we won't get anywhere near it, is this fifth dynamic of the formation of these communities, of prophetic communities that embody in themselves as far as is sort of possible within this, the constraints of our existence, embody in ourselves this resurrection power, this resurrection reality, which in itself is the beginning of new creation. Yeah? Okay, so that's really there just to bring us up to date, just to sort of remind ourselves of the ground that we've covered. Any questions?